What's up, guys? Had a video today to look at how damage is calculated in Marvel Future Fight. I just finished the first set of tests, and I wanted to just go over the results quickly. It was to determine how crit rate is, how crits are calculated. And I used Nova because I don't have a damage proc on him, and he's honestly one of the few characters in my entire roster that has chance to penetrate barrier, which is important because we're going to be testing an ABX on No Restrictions Day, and his little ability is to put up guard break or guard hit, so you have to be able to penetrate that so you get consistent results. So he is like my literal only character on my roster that has 100% chance to penetrate barrier and does not have a damage proc obelisk. So let's get into the results quickly. I will pop up my spreadsheet here. So as you can see, I have here's Nova's crit rate is 37.5%, and my crit damage is 147. So Nova also has guaranteed crit on his tier 2 passive. Oh, can't see that. Guaranteed crit, 30%. So if you can see here, his actual chance to crit is calculated here. It's about 56% chance to crit. So what we would expect to see is about 56% of my results to have a crit multi of 1.47, and when we look through, the results do not show that. There is quite a bit of variance, but I think it's because when you kill the guys in the background, the little mobs for ABX, there's little guys that appear as well as the boss. Those give you points as well. So they do spawn at semi-random times, so sometimes I would kill more than others, so there is some variance. But as you can see, what I expected to see was these numbers being about just over 3,000, and then a lot of them are averaging out right around 2,000. But with 56% crit, what we would expect to see is a little bit over half of them being about 3,000, and a little bit under half being about 1,000 to 2,000, somewhere in that range. But really, if you average it out and take the standard deviation, it's pretty low. So this leads me to believe that crit is calculated based on each hit of the skill, which is pretty crazy. So it's not based... I guess you could think of it like you're doing World Boss, you never notice that you crit once. And like you never notice on Luna Snow that 62% of the time your tier 3 skill does like twice as much damage, right? So I guess it makes sense that it's calculated per hit. The more you know, I guess. Next, we're going to be moving on to elemental damage. Alrighty, just about to finish the last data point for the Shuri test. This is just what it looks like each time I go in. I reset my game, I go through, I pick all the characters, and all I do is walk up, press 5 one time, and then after that I reset again. But this will be the last reset, so after this I'll have a decent knowledge of this part. Hit 5. See, sometimes the proc can mess up exactly the damage, but we got 27-17 for this. Alrighty, and we go in here, and we do... Alright, I just finished the final test, and it's been interesting. I learned some stuff, and I confirmed some stuff I kind of already knew, but I'm just going to go straight into it. I will tell you, I used Psylocke for the second part of this test. It was a little bit difficult because she does have a damage proc obelisk, right? So there's going to be some variance, as well as that she has an ISO 8 set, an offensive one, so she gets all attack when it procs. So it was a little bit difficult to test, but I just had a slightly larger sample size than I would have otherwise, and it all evened out. And beyond that, the results show pretty much what I expected it to. So I'm going to go over it quickly. Let's just maximize this then. Okie dokie. So if we go over here, all I did each time was pick Psylocke, and I had a team for the first test. I would run in with Psylocke, Ronin, and Korath, which as you can see gives nothing, no bonuses at all. And I ran this the same every time. And I would go in, I'd run and use my 5th skill, and I averaged it out. So as you can see here, her base mind damage, so I should say not her base, but because she has a mind damage obelisk and her 5th skill gives her another 35%, I believe. Can't see, one sec. Yeah, an extra 35%. That adds up to this number here, 77% mind damage. So over like 6 or 7 runs, the average there was 18,000 score from just her 5th skill in ABX, and you don't have to worry about the guard break or the guard shield because she gets 100% chance to penetrate that. So that at least kept it a little bit more even. And so then I added a second team for the second test. The first one was just the control. The second test I ran was the same team. Here, let me get rid of this. Was the same team, except for instead of Ronin, I added in Ancient One. And he has 25% to all allies of elemental damage, right? So where is that? Yeah, elemental damage all by 25%. So what I would expect to see is one of two things. Either it can act multiplicatively or additively, right? And so if it was multiplicative, we would expect to see 18k to go up by another 25%. 18,000 times 1.45. Oops. 1.45. So it's a little bit above what we would expect it to be, but I just chalked it up to variance. So I will go ahead and say that from my small testing, I'll come up with the conclusion that elemental damage stacks multiplicatively with other modifiers such as damage to supervillains. I pretty much expected it to be that way, and I also tested and briefly found that it adds additively to itself. All right. And here is the interesting one. This is the one I was the most curious about. I was the least certain about this going in, but what I have found based on this is that elemental damage stacks multiplicatively with damage to supervillains. And here is the interesting one to me. This category is damage to male characters. So this was She-Hulk lead, and it adds another 55%. And as you can see from the average here, let me just highlight the averages. 1 second. The average with this, it shows that all of these stack multiplicatively with each other, including the damage to supervillains and damage to male characters. So that's pretty big, right? So that means that if you bring in a support and you bring in She-Hulk, they're actually stacking multiplicatively, not additively, which is new to me. Alright, now that I have the data, it's time to go through, and now that we've analyzed it, I want to just do kind of a TLDR. It will be kind of a not right now, thanks though. It'll be kind of a TLDR. It'll be more like, what does the data actually mean? So, elemental damage stacks additively with other elemental damage. As far as I can tell, everything stacks additively with itself, right? So, when you have a support buff, it stacks additively with itself. So, if you bring Shuri and Coulson, it stacks additively. So, you'll get increased damage to supervillain type characters by 45% from both of them. So, you'll get 90% increased damage dealt to supervillain characters. And although this sounds the same, it's not. So here, let me bring up Chrome so I can see this again. All right, so you get 45% from Shuri. Then this is Shuri right here, and this one is Coulson. He also has 45%. Additively, this means 90% increased damage total. If it was multiplicative, it would be 1.45 times 1.45, like that. And so the total would be something higher. Would be 2.10 total. 2.1025. So this is like 110% roughly. It's about 110%. Right. So I mean, we can just do this in practice to help you if you use a skill. So like this is how it does work. It works additively. Let me highlight that. It works additively, not multiplicatively. Between damage multipliers of the same wording, right? So Coulson and Shuri both say increased damage to supervillains. I didn't test all of them, but I did test damage to male and damage to supervillains, and they stacked multiplicatively, not additively. So like, let's pretend we have a skill that does 100 damage only, right? So in the first example, you get 90% increase. So this is 190 damage. In the second example, so this is for additive. Oops, not green, yellow. And this second one will be for multiplicative. It does 100 damage. If it's multiplicative, after Shuri's bonus, it's at 145. And then here's the multiplicative part, because now you get 145 times 1.45 again, right? So now you're at 210 damage. This is if they stack multiplicatively, and this is if they stack additively, right? So I don't know if you're familiar with the term diminishing returns, but essentially when things stack additively, when multipliers stack additively, the first time you're getting that boost is the biggest it could possibly be. It's 100%. You're increasing your damage by exactly the number it says, right? So somebody like Quicksilver has obviously no native support bonus, so if you add in Shuri along with Quicksilver, you'll get an extra 45% damage. That means after all your calculations have been done, well, not all of them, I'll get over that in a second, when you're dealing damage, if Quicksilver doesn't attack, it does 100 damage, it'll multiply it by an extra 45%, so I'll do 145 damage, right? So the first instance of adding this damage is the best. So for instance, like the CTP of Judgment, people have been curious who this is best on, and I'll ignore the all attack and the chain hit damage because I mean, that's just a different part of it. We'll look purely at the increased damage to all element damage by 200%, right? So if we look purely at that, who are the best characters for this CTP? Characters that have the lowest elemental damage possible. If you are an elemental dealing character that has 0 bonus damage for that type, so Cyclops has, oh, he has an obelisk, plus he has passive, so not Cyclops. Somebody like, I think Inferno is pretty low. I gave him, so 35%, no, not Inferno. Iceman, I remember somebody saying Iceman's great for this. I don't even know an Iceman. I'll find him. Iceman, here we go. You're not going to be able to see his stats, but if you look through all of these, you'll notice that he doesn't have any cold damage anywhere, right? So, no cold damage buffs, I should say. Right? So you have crit rate, you have all attack, you have all speed, but you're not seeing any cold damage buffs, right? So natively, if you don't give him a cold damage obelisk, you will have 0% cold damage. So what does that mean for the CTP of Judgment on Iceman? It means that for him, it is a 200% multiplier on his damage, because it'll be the only elemental damage he has, right? Unless you bring along, like, Misty Knight, and then that'll be worse again. So for the case of Luna Snow, she's not actually getting the full 200% bonus, because she already has 45% cold damage, right? So it'll be slightly less. It's still a big bump in damage, but it's not going to be a full 200%. So like for instance, if you test this versus the CTP of Rage, the results are very similar. But in theory on Iceman, if you were to test them, the CTP of Judgment should outperform the CTP of Rage every time on Iceman, as long as you're not bringing other cold damage dealing characters. Thanks for watching. If you guys have questions, I think I'm going to put this on Reddit, so feel free to answer on Reddit or the YouTube comment. I'll hopefully get to them. Yeah, it's a little complicated and I didn't do the best at explaining, so yeah, any questions, don't hesitate to ask.